My guest today, who needs no introduction, but we'll get one nonetheless, is the wonderful Bentley Pascoe, who is a multi-time master aquatic horticulturist, and just an all-around good guy. So, Bentley, I appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, happy to join you, man.
I'm going to run through the chat real quick, say hello to everybody, and thank a couple of people. First up was the Zen Ginger in the chat with a $2 super sticker saying she is here. Thank you very much for that, Zen Ginger. You are, as you know, at this point, the very first super sticker on the channel, so I really do appreciate that. That's awesome. I was not quite prepared to deal with it, if you will. I kind of figured it would pop up, but thank you very much. I'm glad you did it before it started because there was a lot of blushing involved. So thank you for that. 44 Mad Guy Fishing More, hello and welcome. William Pridemore, FNS Fish Room, hello. Caleb's Aquatics. Just real quick, I want to apologize, Caleb. I know that you do a stream. I was just kind of rolling with the time frame, so I'm sorry, little buddy. I will make it up to you, I promise.
It's all my fault.
Yeah, we're gonna blame Bentley. Absolutely,
yeah, that's fine.
See, and then the Zen Ginger again with a $5 super chat. Am I the first super chat too? Congrats on the monetization, Fish Room Fever. Yes, first super sticker and first super chat ever on the channel go to the Zen Ginger. Again, nice. I thank you very much for that, Zen. Not required, but definitely appreciated. FNS Fish Room again. John Hatmaker, who I actually met in the local fish store today. It was a pleasure to meet you, sir, and I appreciate you very much. Let's see. Zen Ginger tossing out lots of links. Amber with Big City Bettas came through with a $10 super chat. Congratulations on getting monetized, James. Amber, Big City Bettas, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Thank you. I will hopefully get less awkward as things go on. I had a feeling I was going to kind of pull a Bob Steenfot on these when he gets the big ones, and he's just like, I don't know what to say. I do appreciate that very, very much, and thank you for the congratulations also. And don't let the spelling bug you; it'll be okay. Let's see, Sherry Kramer, hello, thank you for being here, Mr. Fish, sir, Mr. B's Fishing Things, shared out on FishTubers notification, thank you. Kaylor's Aquatics, Big J Fish Keeper, Cody Donovan, Frank White, Tampa Tom Fishing, Mrs. Griffin Fish Room, Caleb's Aquatics is there again, Mickey M, and I think I have made it to the bottom of the chat. So thank you all for showing up.
And I recognize a lot of people who are kind of regular commenters on some of my videos too. So,
oh yeah, we've got a
how do you folks?
The good, I don't want to say basic, but the standard fish fam, if you will, has a strong presence.
Yeah.
For those that somehow don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you, I guess, specialize in, if you will, on YouTube.
Sure. So I am a plant psychopath, as I like to say, which is to say that I have been doing plants quite a lot. I'm as Frank White mentioned in chat, I'm an 8 times master aquatic horticulturalist for my local club, the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society. Basically, all that means is I do more than I probably should when it comes to plants. I'm also a bit of a rainbow fish specialty or specialist, rather. I can speak English, I promise. 4 hours of sleep does a lot to you. But I love rainbow fish. So if you watch my channel and you don't like rainbow fish, I'm impressed because I talk about them on end. I also have one line of guppies. And then one of the other kind of major things I do as far as my content is concerned is a lot of product testing. So I work as a software and hardware test engineer for a living. So I like bringing professional testing standards to the kind of equipment that I use and bringing that information to people. So I tend to go, like, if a product is new, you'll see a lot of reviews from other folks relatively soon. And then between 4 and 6 months later, you'll finally see one from me, because I feel like if I don't take that much time abusing that piece of equipment, I won't know how good or bad it really is.
I got you.
And I do a lot of things relatively scientific, in the sense of I take heavily professional testing standards to how I do things when I'm working with equipment or when I'm testing something. So it's a little more rigorous than just like, I put it on my tank and I like it. It's typically going to be something where I'm looking at a lot of little things and making sure that one of those isn't a massive fault that people have missed or are missing something that's really positive, whatever that may be. And probably the best example is the level of crazy I've gone with, like the Fluval lighting and the Fluval Smart app.
Well, yeah, because you actually kind of rewrote the programming, didn't you? If I remember, you
so
the settings
before they released Pro Mode, I, with some help from a viewer who first kind of suggested something they'd figured out, we figured out how to use basically power failure occurrence by using a switch that would turn power off from the light to make it do effectively as many siestas as we've ever wanted. So you basically could just force the light to think that every time it loses power for more than, like, I think it's about 5 minutes, it assumes when it regains power that it's 0 hour or midnight.
Okay.
And from there on out, it just runs its program as if it's that time. So you could shift your programming to say that your sunrise starts at midnight, and it would go off, and then whenever you turn it back on, it starts sunrising again.
Oh, wow.
And you can do all sorts of like weird stuff with it if you really wanted to. Then they release Pro Mode, and you don't need that anymore because Pro Mode covers it for you.
That's awesome.
And a lot of people early on didn't understand how Pro Mode worked, so I covered it to make sure that people understood how to program things in Pro Mode.
I will be awesome. I am definitely closer to that. I put it on my tank and I like it.
That's perfectly fine. Like, that's 99% of Aquarius. I'm the one weirdo in the group. That's really all it comes down to.
Well, see, my in depth, if you will, is I've got a light in there that I'm going to recap on, and it's been like 2 months. So that's my in depth, is letting things grow for 2 months and going, hey, look, it'll grow everything from duckweed to this.
Yeah, but you know what? 2 months of time tells you a lot about a light. The only thing it doesn't tell you is, after a year, did the LEDs start to dim? After 2 years, did the LEDs start to dim, right? That requires you to have that light that long. But most people will like look at a light and be like, I turned it on. Well, it looks pretty bright. That must be good. Right. 2 months will show you all the growth or whether or not it causes algae. That's enough.
Bob Kaler, I want to say real quick, says at Fisher and Fever, you missed your first super chat too. Bob, if it was prior to the Zen Ginger, I did not see it. Oh, hold on a second. Here we go. No, there's Big City. Now I see it. Sorry, chat jumped on me, Bob. Bob Kaler with the $10 super sticker, the jumping yippee. Kaler's Aquatics, thank you, my friend. I appreciate that very much. I'll have to put that towards buying you a cup of coffee next we meet up. Thank you for that. My apologies that I missed it. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything else. The chat kind of jumped while I was watching you. I think I'm good. Okay, so yeah, that's I was looking at the light that you just talked about, and I'm debating on going ahead and getting it, especially if it's going to be 6 months until you do your review, because I think that it'll be a good one for a 40-gallon breeder, is what I'm looking at. So
I've had the light testing for like a week, and what I will say about it so far is that I very quickly remembered why I hate the Phoenix 24/7 mode. And I'm testing it with its 24/7 mode, despite the fact that I know I hate it. Because I just have to see if the light's gonna like freak out after a month of being on 24/7 mode or not. Gotcha. What I think is important with that light is that the actual one I'm testing is not on Amazon yet. And but I have to thank my people in the comment for pointing out that I'm an idiot because I linked the wrong light. That particular light they haven't put up on Amazon yet. They're working on it. The viewer who sent it to me has like been in touch with that actual company themselves.
I got
and got them through a different way that they had available somewhere else before they put them on the Amazon.
Okay.
The other light has gone out to a few people, and you can find videos on the other JCMP light, and it's a different light setup. It's much closer to like a pawfly style light in the sense of how its light arrangement is. If you've seen, that's another budget light, but typically they don't go more than about 2 feet across.
Gotcha.
What I will say is I really have trouble finding anything as good as a Beams work on a 40 breeder.
Okay.
For a budget light, I've had Beams works on 40 breeders several times, or still have them on 40 breeders, and they're so good for how cheap they are.
Gotcha. I will,
because they put out a lot of light and they're pretty wide. The only thing is they're very few LEDs, so they're kind of spread out. So you'll see like some disco dots if you do like white sand, where you see like the red dot, the blue dot.
I gotcha. Yes.
But the light overall for your plants is pretty good for how cheap it is. You know, if you're trying to like not do fluvals, you're not some psychopath like me. That's probably the best budget light I've tested. And a lot of folks will say that it's X or Y because that's the one they like the most. Right. And that's fine. It's just identify what you want that light to be doing for you. And then you can kind of figure out which one's going to do the trick and which one won't.
Gotcha. We've got a question from the chat. Recon's Aquarium says, question for Bentley. Vallisneria is melting back as expected in the new tank. Is it best to trim the dead/transparent leaves away as it does, or just let it be?
So you can trim it away. Just keep in mind, any species of val, when you cut it, it's going to kill that leaf no matter what. So sometimes it takes a long time. Like you can give it a haircut and it'll take forever to die back, and sometimes it'll die back very quickly. The best thing is just like, if you know that root cluster itself, the little rosette, is healthy, yeah, trim it away and let the new growth slowly take over, and you should be okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Because I can grow plants, but I have no clue what I'm doing, so to speak. It's kind of like I got some plants and I put them in a tank and it got full, so I thinned them out and I moved them to another tank. I
mean, 2 years ago, I could have said I had no clue what I was doing too, and it would have been relatively accurate. So that's okay.
Real quick, Mike with the Fish Tank Barn, $5 super chat, testing this to see if it works. Yes, sir, Mike. Thank you. Much appreciated, my friend.
Nice guy, Mike.
We'll put that towards the ice cream fund for the big fish deal. Yeah, Mike's an awesome guy. I'm going to have him on. Oh, Lord, the date eludes me at the moment, but look forward to that because he's going to be on the show as well in the upcoming future.
I'm jealous of the big fish deal.
Oh yeah, that's going to be my first fish show, so I'm really, really looking forward to that. Cool. We're having like a mini creator meetup here in Knoxville next week, but the big fish deal will be my actual like first legitimate show. So I think that's going to be a blast.
Nice. It's one of those things where like I'd love to travel to a lot of the quote smaller unquote, so like not your Aquashella or Aquatic Experience size shows. I wish I could just travel to a ton of them, but you know, my work doesn't really allow that so much.
Yeah, that's right. I am fortunate that my vacation time, I get 2 weeks vacation. The way they let me break it up, like the big fish deal will only take 1 day of vacation because I'll have the Friday of 1 week and then either the Saturday or Sunday of the next week is my day off because I'm required to work 6 days a week. So I just have to use 1 vacation day to go for the 3 days.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I'm blessed in that it works out that way. Thank you to everyone for the congratulations in the chat. I appreciate that. So let me ask you, what would be, all right, so I want to be a plant nerd. How do I do it? I guess that's the best way for me to phrase it.
Well, there are several great YouTubers you can watch and learn from. One is actually in chat. That's Corvus Oskin. He knows a ton about plants. He and I often trade plants because it'll be one or the two of us will have success with the plant when the other one doesn't. Gotcha. So like he's recently had success with a bunch of more difficult plants that my tanks have decided to just like not let be happy. And you know, in the past, there's been like things like crypts and stuff that I've done really well with that he's had a little more trouble with as far as how fast they've settled in. Okay. And I mean, there's tons of people who know a good amount about plants, but one of the best things to do is get really familiar with the plant deficiencies that are out there. So there's this great graphic. You can literally just look up aquarium plant deficiencies, and there's going to be a graphic that shows you like yellowing leaves equals this, holes like this in the leaves means this. Learn that very early, because then you can look at your plants and identify what's going on with your water system.
Okay.
And why a plant isn't thriving. Now, if your plants thrive all the time, that you're just lucky, and that's easy. But knowing that information will matter for when you do struggle with a plant. The next thing I would say is don't be afraid to fail. Like I started with just this fluval flex that's behind me. And the first like 4 plants that I put in there, all of them struggled and had some kind of problem. But part of that was like me making mistakes and not realizing I made them. And as I learned and figured out I was making mistakes, that all of a sudden things started to click. And then like I went with really simple stuff like some Java moss, Pogostemon octopus, and a little bit of Anubias. And then from there, it was just like, oh, well, I can do these 3 things. So maybe I can try a Ludwigia and a Rotala and a this. And like, you kind of just start easy. Like, don't try to dive super deep right away. Get your footing and understand what you're having success with early. Okay. And then be willing to like, okay, I can keep all this easy stuff and make it look great. Let me pick one medium or slightly harder plant and just try it.
Gotcha.
And then just try it and don't be afraid to fail. Like you kind of have to learn, because my water, I can tell you like all you have to do to keep pink flamingo crypts is do XYZ. But your water is different than my water. So I could be giving you the worst advice possible for your water, because it might be you have this like super hard mineral rich water, and what you actually need to be doing is finding a way to like soften that down some, or maybe it's just like don't fertilize as heavily as I do because you already have a bunch of minerals in the water. It's lots of trial and error on your behalf. You can always take great information from somebody who knows what they're doing for their water, like right. Like anybody, I mean, chat mentioned H2O plants. He's another guy who knows a lot about plants. You can always try what other people are trying. And when you start to see issues, try to look at what the plant is doing. And again, refer to that deficiency chart and try to figure out why. Gotcha. The more that you teach yourself, the faster and better you become. Because if you rely heavily on like some chucklehead in Seattle to tell you what to do, you don't learn. Right. But if you learn on your own, you teach yourself, like failure is the best teacher, right? The more that you are willing to force yourself to figure the problems out, the faster and easier things become. And then pretty soon you could run through the same Master Aquatic Horticulturist program I've done, and you'd be looking at it like, that wasn't that hard. Why is it hard? Why does that matter? Gotcha. It's just one of those things where like, it's much like any kind of fish keeping. It takes time, patience, and being willing to have a problem.
And like you said, what works for me may not work for you.
Right.
I guess I'll get to this question real quick, and then I have another question for you. Chewy LTD says, at Fish Room Fever, I would like to ask a question. Are any plants from the Rift Valley lakes in the hobby for those who like true biotope aquariums? I had to use Jungle Val back in the day.
Well, so you can find the same Vallisnera species that you find in Lake Tanganyika. Okay. And the problem is most of the Rift Valley lakes don't have a lot of fully submerged plants. They're plants that are on the shoreline, if there are any plants. Like if you look at like Tang, for example, it's sand, rock, and shells. There's not many plants in it. There are some spots when you get toward, depending on the time of year, whether the water level is down or up, where you're going to find Vallisnera. But if you go to the depths of the lake, you're not finding any plants. Okay. It's one of those things where you're never going to get a real biotope in a planted tank. because most of the aquatic systems out there do not have submerged plants all the time or ever.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Or at least they don't have the mixtures we want. So like you look at like a quote nature aquarium or a quote biotope, and you'll have a lot of plants form from roughly the same area of the world, but none of those plants exist together underwater.
Gotcha.
So like where you will find cryptocorynes, for example, about the only thing you will typically find with them are Piptospatha, which is it's a epiphyte style plant that is very commonly found in the rock work near where a lot of crypts grow in some of the stream systems that are in like Borneo and stuff like that. And it's all about those places go from being 3 foot deep to 1.5 foot deep in a day. Oh, wow. Like their water levels shift constantly, and you can go back day after day. And I only know this after having Karen Randall speak at my club. This is where I learned a lot of the stuff. Is I just happen to be very lucky and have a club that brings in lots of people way smarter than me, and I'm just really good at absorbing the information I need. That's really the only thing that I'm good at. I'm not some master wizard of any form. I'm just really good at learning just the stuff I need for what I do. But those water systems, like day after day, will completely change. Like you could go there tomorrow and it'd be 1 foot deep, and the day after that it could be 4 foot deep. Wow. Because the rain seasons and how hot it is are crazy out there. But then you could look at like Anubias, which a lot of it comes from parts of Africa. So does Java fern. Right? You can find Java fern species in parts of Africa, but you usually don't find them in the same water system.
Okay.
It's one of those things where we can do a biotope, and really all it is like here's a lot of plants from roughly the same region and fish from roughly the same region. But like if you have a planted clown loach tank, clown loaches don't hang out in areas where there's a lot of plants. There's not a lot of plant life where they live naturally in the wild, except for on the shores. And then you have some plant life that will be semi-immersed, so it might, depending on the water system or how close it is to water's edge, it might be partially in the water, but for the most part, it's shoreline plants. It's not deep in the water system.
Gotcha.
But that's where we get to create nature, where we can just manufacture what we want to do.
Right. That's why, like, I'm sure for example, the tank that's in the background behind us, I'm sure the plants in that are from all over the place and nowhere near even remotely biotope style.
None of my tanks are biotope style. I'll just tell you that, and I don't care. I like them being what they are.
I do want to say I'm having a total fanboy moment with Corvus Oskin being here. I hadn't noticed until you'd mentioned that, but that's awesome. So thank you for being here. Let me see. There was a question. It wasn't highlighted. It was plants for 85-degree water. I think hard water, if I'm not mistaken.
That's a rough combo. So very few plants tolerate water above about 82 degrees. Most of them don't even like going much past 80. And then also putting them in hard water. So you'd want to start looking at probably some species of Java fern, just because they're so naturally tough. Anubias can probably do the same because it comes from a kind of hot climate. So it should be able to tolerate hotter temperatures. You'll want to avoid mostly stems, because a lot of the stems come from soft water in some way, shape, or form, or at least less alkaline water. So they might struggle with the combination of heat and hard water. But then again, if you go to a local's tank and they have relatively similar water and temperature, and you see them growing Ludwigia, get Ludwigia from that person.
Gotcha.
Like, find the people in your area who are doing stuff. If you do have nearby, especially if you have a club, I'd find out what they're growing if they're in similar temperatures. Like, what I tell you is based on my knowledge in Seattle's crazy soft water that I have to buffer up just so that it's not an acid bath.
Gotcha. So
it's great. It's great for discus, but it's horrible for rainbow fish, which is the one fish I love keeping.
So it's a lot like getting locally sourced fish. It's try and get, if you can, get fish that are accustomed to the water near you.
Right. A lot of the rules for our fish apply to our plants.
Okay.
almost all aquatics is kind of like that. It's the funny thing to think about is that the more that you work with the stuff that is local to you, the less you're going to have to fight.
Gotcha. We do have a, excuse me, $2 super chat. Aquarium is maintained by Andy. Says, love the plant talk. Thank you, Andy, very much for that. I appreciate it. I enjoyed your, excuse me, your stream the other day. Let me see here if there's anything highlighted. Chewy LTD says, except for that species of Allisneria, and then you would need to know the species of fish that hang out in the area at Fish Room Fever. Make sure. And Bob Kaler came. Oop, it just jumped on me. Bob Kaler came through with a $4 cup of coffee. Looks like I'll be getting you a large cup of coffee, Bob. I appreciate that. Kaler's Aquatics, very much so, my friend. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much. It's my first monetized live stream, so you guys are going to make me blush.
Try not to freak out. You'll be all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Mickey M says, there was an awesome site with Crypticorn plus betas. A scientist was putting loads of pics and info up. Do I know that one? I do not know that one. Do you happen to know that one?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, I'm sure I could search and find it, but that sounds awesome. I mean, the flex behind me when it had my older beta guy in there, it's all crypts for the most part, and he loved it because he'd just go flop on a bunch of crypt leaves and just sit there like it was a hammock for him. It was great. He just hang out outside of the flow, just flopping the leaves, just be fine. Then he'd come shooting out of it like he was trying to hide like some kind of military ambush style when it was food time.
Oh, that's great. Multi-Tank Addiction Chris says, can you tell Bentley thanks again for my blue moss-cows?
Yeah, man. Thanks for the art. It's gonna get some use somewhere soon.
Very nice. So,
well, soon. I still gotta finish like rehabbing my back before I can start lifting the things I need to lift around my house again.
Understandable. This is where I upset some of the viewing audience, and my apologies. But I want to ask you a little bit about the YouTube side of things.
Sure.
So what made you get into YouTube? What made you want to start?
It's funny. I first, like, the very first video I did as far as for fish. So I originally did very small amounts of gaming content on my channel, and it's still there. You can find it if you go back deep enough. And one of my most popular videos is still a gaming video. I used to do guides for online MMO called Final Fantasy 14, which I still occasionally play, although I haven't played it in like 2 months now. I've been too busy. So I used to make guides for a small group of people that were out there, and then just steadily kind of randomly got views. But what got me into doing FishTube specifically and committing more to YouTube instead of like, here's a random guide video. Corey used to do for Aquarium Co-op, for those who somehow don't know Corey. I mean,
right.
You never know. It might happen.
Yeah.
They used to do like his viewer home show. And so I had shot a video of my big rainbow community when I had first set it up. And it's changed so much in that period of time. But I'd shot that first video, and then shortly after that, one of the really small channels I had been watching, who has kind of gone by the wayside, it's just Baron Tropicals, did like a contest that was like, shoot a video as your entry. And so it was kind of like, I'd shot my second video, and then I kind of wanted to like just shoot another one and shoot another one. And it's just kind of like, I got interested in I started doing it at first like, well, now this is an opportunity to document what I'm doing in fish for myself. So I can look back in a year and go like, oh my God, that's what that tank looked like when I first set it up. And that, or like, oh yeah, I remember when I had those fish. I remember how I screwed up those fish. Damn it.
Yes, absolutely.
And then slowly I started getting, I figured out a way with my work schedule to make it so I could get more reliable in posting at least a video a week. And then the bug really hit from there. And I started focusing more on where I could share my aspect and knowledge of the hobby with other people, because it is kind of specialized. And I didn't see much of that on YouTube. to the level that I thought should be.
Right.
So from there, it's just kind of like, okay, here's what I don't think is there that I can provide based on my understanding and expertise. So let's help make other people better at those things.
And that's awesome. That's I definitely, my first thought was kind of like you said, the documentation of being able to look back at what I had, how it's grown, things I've screwed up, and then also my thought being like case in point, what if my parents had a YouTube channel, being able to leave those things for my kids, that way one day they'll be able to look back and go, hey, this is my dad made this YouTube video 20 years ago, or however long, almost a video diary, if you will.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I never thought that far ahead, but that's actually a really cool way to look at it.
Yeah. Well, my and no condolences needed, but my father passed like 20 some odd years ago. So I think about things like that. Like, what if he had a YouTube channel where I would have, those videos of him, things like that. That's kind of where that thought came from. Aquarium is maintained by Andy with another $2 super chat. This is an extra $2.98 for your 1,000 subs. I appreciate that very, very much, Andy. Always a pleasure to have you with or without the super chats. And then Fishkeeper Cole has got a question. Says, at Fisher and Fever, I went to my local creek this weekend to plant hunt, and I have no idea what plants I got. Do you know of any plant ID guides out there? So that would be a question for you, because I've actually asked you this question before in your live stream, I think it was. Yeah.
So one of the best options currently that you have is a Google service, basically, that lets you put in a photo and it tries to identify it. There's not really, aside from taking something like there's the Dennerley plant manual. I can't remember the exact name. I'm sure Joel can correct me in chat, but there's things like that, and there's some, if you really want to go crazy, Crystal Castleman has this massive aquarium plants basically book that you could walk through and just look at pictures and slowly figure out what it is. But the fast way is probably Google. The other fast way is like some of the there's lots of great Facebook groups out there. So there's the like aquarium group support, and there's tons of plant or specific fish oriented Facebook groups, and a lot of them are pretty helpful. Very rarely do you find one where they're like, how dare you ask us a question to ID something? Like I see it in one of the rainbow fish groups I'm in all the time, is like, can anybody help me ID this rainbow fish? And then you occasionally will get somebody like Peter Unmack, who's the guy that scientifically describes rainbow fish down in Australia.
Oh, wow.
And so like a lot of the fish that have been named, it's because Peter Unmack has written up all the paperwork for them. And like, if you want somebody who knows their fish, that's the guy, right? And like every once in a while, I'll be like, oh, that's this. You can tell by XYZ. And then like, it's way more scientific. My brain's just like, you could just said it's this, man. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, that's basically what I've come down to, and that was again from your advice on one of yours, because I had the same question, like, hey, how can I figure out what this stuff is? And I also want to say, I think that's awesome that you're going out and doing some local plant harvesting. I've done some of the same around here. I guess legal disclaimer: check your local laws and make sure that you're allowed to do that.
Don't break the law.
Don't break the law. Stuff. Let's see. Sure.
And you can, one other thing, if you're doing it locally, very often Fish and Wildlife will have some level of guide to the level of native species of plants that are in your area. So you can basically look up Fish and Wildlife paperwork if you want to go a little more nerdy, and that will give you like a list, and then from there you can try and narrow it down. Just another thing you can like I've done that looking at specific types of Ludwigia that grow in like the Southeast and stuff like that in the United States, just to see where you could, in theory, go harvest it yourself legally if you wanted to.
Gotcha. And I have a question about that, but real quick, I want to address the super chat from Chris at Multi-Tank Addiction. $20 super chat. Hey, James, you get the last super chat of the pay period. Chris, my brother, thank you. I appreciate that. Not required, but very much appreciated. You're awesome, buddy, and I love you. So thank you very much for that. I'll probably be turning around and sending that back your way for some more of your artwork, because I've got a wall that I need to finish decorating. There's a question in the chat that I want to get to, but real quick, I want to ask you, in terms of local plant collecting, what would you recommend for, I guess, a quarantine, if you will, on local plants?
So there's several ways you can do it. Probably the safest but most effective way is using potassium permanganate, which there's lots of guides online. This is like the only reason I've never created a potassium permanganate guide. It's going to be a kind of purple liquid, and basically what it does is it oxidizes what it touches, so it will kill off bacteria and typically parasites pretty fast. So you basically end up soaking your plants for between 5 and 10 minutes. It depends on the plant. And then pull it out, rinse it really, really thoroughly, so you can go to a bucket of clean water if you want to, and slosh it around. But then I would just really go under your tap and very thoroughly rinse the plant off to get all the potassium permanganate off.
Okay.
You can also do mixtures that are a certain amount of hydrogen peroxide to water.
Gotcha.
Or you could just quite literally take a spray bottle of hydrogen peroxide, spray it over the plant, let it sit for like 10 seconds, and then rinse it off. And that's going to kill a lot of things very, very quickly.
Yeah, I made the mistake of bringing in some of the aliens, as everyone calls them, the wonderful dragonfly larvae once. So never again.
Well, if you got the right size fish, they'll just eat the dragonfly larva.
Yeah, it didn't work out quite that way. They were picking off the guppy fry, but
that they will do. Guppy's bad, but rainbow fish, that's just a snack waiting to happen.
Yeah, my piranha wouldn't touch them. That was the other tank that those plants went into. But
that's surprising.
It was kind of neat in that tank that see them form out, and then they'd be sitting on top of the duckweed, which reminds me I have another question. But real quick, I want to get Mickey M's question. Is this question for Bentley or someone else? Where can I buy your floating fry rings seen in Bentley's videos? I live in Europe. Anyone ship here?
Okay, so those are Swiss Tropicals is the seller that I know, but they get them from someone in Germany.
Okay.
So they're a German design, so you might be able to track them down. Realistically, what I would say is you could make something like that, or there are better options. So I've found several problems with them in just my use, in that the filter mesh at the bottom of those is extremely fine. So fine that it doesn't even let like between 5 and 50 micron food through. And that can start gunking up and get kind of nasty very, very fast, which sucks. So you find yourself having to clean them a lot if you're using a powdered food. Now, if you're using live food, it's not so bad, because in theory, the live food will stay water column wise long enough. But they're a German design, so you actually probably can find them on one of the German retailers. I'm pretty sure Swiss Tropicals might tell you where to get them. It's one of those things where, like, he's a business, but if he's not shipping to you, he might tell you who also carries that product, the guy who runs Swiss Tropicals, because he's pretty responsive to email, where you could get them in Europe, Germany, wherever, if he knows that there's a retailer that sells them and that they just happen to have the same hookup, and that's how he brought them over to the States. So that might be your first option if you want specifically those rings. They are effective. There's just some things to them that I personally don't like, but they are pretty useful.
Very good. And that's funny that they're coming from over there to here. That
what probably happened is the guy from Swiss Tropicals has probably got the design and is getting them made somewhere else, but he probably paid whoever made them originally in Germany for that design so that he could use it in the States.
Makes perfect sense. Big City Betta says, Bentley, any ideas on brackish plants other than pygmy chainsword? I'm going to mess this up. Anarachis. I've heard it pronounced a couple different ways. Anacris.
Anacris is usually it. Yeah.
Hygrophilia. She's trying to kill me.
Corymbosa.
Mangrove, Sagittaria, Bacopa, or Crypt ciliata. breeding Indian pipefish and need plant options. Wow, that was embarrassing in front of the plant guru.
So I am really terrible at answering that because I have really soft water and don't like brackish water. But
there you go.
But what I would do is look at a lot of the plants that grow naturally in Florida. Florida's water is so hard naturally, and they have a lot of areas where you get brackish water that actually do still have plants, that you might have a good option by looking at like a Florida Fish and Wildlife Guide and looking at some of the naturally occurring plants in Florida and finding most likely some of the Ludwigia species, because they tend to be the most durable plants that grow naturally in Florida. There are some Rotalas too, but the Rotalas tend to prefer that softer water. So I would look into some Ludwigias. You could probably get Ludwigia repens to convert and handle it. Any of the like high pH Val is going to do that, but that's kind of the same as Pygmy Chainsword and Little Boring or Sagittaria. They're all kind of the same basic plant. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the Persicaria species can handle that, just because they're a more woody stemmed kind of reedy plant, and they have a pretty good leaf structure. And one thing that they'll do is they'll just grow emergent out of the water. I do that all the time with mine. So they'll be in water, but they'll collect a lot of light and stuff from outside of that water, and that can help them handle being in a brackish environment. So hopefully that answers your question.
Perfect. And Chris at Multi-Tank Addiction, excuse me, would like to know how the tanks on the back porch are doing now.
My tanks?
That's what it says. So Bentley, how are the tanks on the back porch doing now?
Oh, I had to think for a second. I'm like, I've never shown that on any YouTube video. But then again, he was at my house.
Stalker much? No.
So I have a bunch of tanks that have like broken in previous winter that are out there. There are some that weren't intended to be set up, and rain put enough water into them to where they were kind of set up and had various cultures of like Daphnia or mosquito larvae in them.
Oh, nice.
I've drained almost all of them except for my big stock tote that I keep out there that has a Daphnia culture and by some nature also mosquito larvae. So to answer that question, they're all pretty much drained except for recent rainwater. And relatively soon, I'm going to have a junk hauler come out because I don't want to haul them myself. I've already hurt my back. I don't need to redo that.
Right.
And all the broken stuff's going to go away. And then most of the stuff that is in good condition will probably move to a safer storage place where they're not going to keep like accidentally getting rainwater in them, because I'm lazy and left them on my back deck.
Happens to the best of us. So what are your feelings on duckweed?
It is extremely useful in a sump.
There we go. I love the great duckweed debate because it's one of those that it's like, I hate it or I love it. You don't get a whole lot of middle ground.
So I think the best argument when it comes to duckweed and how to view it does come from Corvus Oskin Joel, which is that in a sump, it is the canary in the coal mine. Because duckweed is so aggressive at how it absorbs nutrients that it's going to have issues before any other plant. So you can kind of identify if there's some deficiency in your water system by watching duckweed in a sump, and having it in a sump, it will stay localized to one chamber.
Right.
If you set your sump up correctly, that is. Now, if you're not doing a sump and you have duckweed on the top of your tank, you do you. I don't want that. I've fought so hard to keep duckweed out of my tanks, and I've had it show up because I got a plant from somebody in my club, and like one stupid frond of duckweed has been on it, and then a week later there's 400 fronds of duckweed in my tank, and I'm sitting there going,
yeah,
I hate this plant. I think if you can control it or you like its look, it's great. But I personally dislike having duckweed in a tank. However, I don't ever look at someone's tank and see duckweed and go, "Oh, how dare you!" Like if that's your jam, man, that's your jam. There are just other floaters I'd rather have if I was going to do floating plants.
Absolutely. I was just curious on your specific opinion on that. Wonderful.
Everybody's got an opinion on duckweed.
Everybody. Oh, yeah. I'm with you. There are tanks that I absolutely positively do not want it in, and when it gets there, I hate it. I hate it. But like my piranha tank, I love it for the diffused lighting, of course, and the nutrient absorption. But the piranha really enjoy that diffused lighting that duckweed cover gives.
That's not surprising.
Yeah.
So they're surprisingly shy fish.
Yeah, and these aren't too bad. I've had them on a lot of my previous live streams. I'll have a camera on them when I do my multi-camera setup, and they don't really hide. They just kind of sit out in the open. I've got that tank slightly planted with a 3-foot piece of driftwood in it, and they have the option to hide, but the majority of them will just sit out in the open end of it and just kind of hang out. But I wanted to ask you, if I may, back to a YouTube question. What kind of camera do you shoot on? Okay. What's your setup like?
So let me go through the evolution of my setup, because I think that's worth talking about.
Oh, yes.
So I started on a little crappy HTC One cell phone, and it has a abysmally bad camera. I did a side upgrade, so I bought a used camera from Joel, but from a friend. So that was a Canon SL1, which is a relatively inexpensive DSLR camera that you can find used pretty regularly. The downside to that camera is that the autofocus is pretty bad.
Gotcha.
The upside is, if you want to take stills, that camera is incredible.
Okay.
Because just a kit lens, and it teaches you how to do manual focus and what some of the other parts of your camera are. It's a really great learning device, and Canons in general are pretty good for that because they're really usable. When my cell phone really needed to be upgraded, I bought a Pixel 2, and the Google Pixels are pretty well known for having incredible cameras on them.
Right.
Really, the only thing that just recently beat them is the newest iPhone. But when the next Pixel comes out, it'll crush that down, because Google has really figured out how to make their cameras incredible via software. So I shot on that for quite a while, and I started augmenting that with moment lenses in order to get myself more of a wide angle, just so I could see more. So I typically only use the moment wide lens. I just really liked the way that looked. It gave me a lot more field of view, and it was a really nice piece of glass. They're a little expensive, but for me, they were worth it because I kind of care about certain levels of quality, and it's totally a personal thing. And then shortly before AGA, I decided I wanted to get myself a big boy camera, and the current camera I have and use is a Sony A6400, which is what they call a crop sensor or APS-C style camera. So it's not full frame like a lot of the other folks will use, but it has incredible autofocus, incredible low light performance, and gets very, very good color no matter what some of the camera nerds will tell you.
I've heard some about it. I've not done a whole lot of research. I'm looking at potentially getting into an M50 when the time comes, but
it's kind of like a competitor to the 6400.
It's a good camera from what I've seen. Like
Zenzo Tazawa uses that, for example. He uses a M50.
Yeah. What now I'm just gonna jump out on a limb here and say, are you using a Rode microphone? That seems to be the standard there.
So most of the time I'm using Rode Video Micro, which is one of the cheapest ones. It powers itself off of your camera. It's a tiny, basically what's called a shotgun style microphone, and they're really good. I mean, you can usually get them for about $50.
Yep.
And it gives you significantly better audio. Although if you're willing to do it and your camera's audio, because most cameras' base audio is really bad. But if you're really to use an editing piece of software to sync your audio together, you can buy just like a lavalier mic and a relatively inexpensive portable recorder. and just record off the lavalier mic and then sync them in your editing software and use the better audio.
Okay.
It's all personal choice. Like some people really like lav mics. I'm too animated with my hands, and where the easiest places are to put lav mics, which is usually here on my collar.
Right.
I ended up like knocking my collar around, so you hear all this like on my microphone from me being an idiot. So I've basically learned to use the shotgun mics, and then done some small work in a program called Audacity, which allows me to just kind of clean up background noise in order to make my audio just a little cleaner and easier to hear.
Yeah, I used Audacity for the first time on my last video that I put out.
Audacity is really great.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to do a lot with it. I just kind of did the basic for a voiceover, but I was amazed at how well it picked up and how well it worked and what I could do with it just with the limited experience I had.
My biggest piece of advice for anybody doing or wanting to do YouTube: your camera does not matter as much as your audio. Bad audio, and like you'll hear probably every YouTuber say this because it's true. Bad audio will make people just walk away from a video. One of my better videos was recorded on the fly, and the audio's garbage. And that's a video where I was just recording a conversation between Dean and I on how to breed autosyncless.
Right.
And the audio is horrible. And I tried to clean it up in post-processing with Audacity, and it was still abysmally bad. But the information is so good, I put it up anyway.
Absolutely.
Because it was just like, if you choose to listen to this terrible audio, the information is really good. And like 90% of the comments are like, God, the audio is so terrible on this. I'm like, I know. I know. I even said it in the intro. The audio is terrible. I know. I want to fix it one day, but both Dean and I are stupidly busy.
I think I know exactly which one you're talking about, because I'm a big Dean nerd like most people are. I try and find anything and everything he's in.
So on that line, Audacity is a free program that can do a lot to your audio. And you can find tons of tutorials where you literally just have to do like 3 little things, and it makes all of your audio so much better for any of your videos. So if you do YouTube and you want to like make your audio a little better, Audacity. It's a little bit of time, yes, but nowadays the amount of time I spend in Audacity is maybe 5 minutes per video.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So once you learn it, it's extremely fast. And like an example, we were talking about this before the stream, but I'll tell people here. Like I've recently mentioned I'm helping a friend's video game, which launches in a month. And part of what I'm doing is helping them process all of their audio. So before the stream, I was sitting here in Audacity finishing audio for a video game. That's all character voices and all sorts of stuff like that. And you can do a lot in a free program really, really easily. It's just taking the like 30 minutes to watch a couple of the tutorials that are out there that are like really good. And then once you've watched that and you've done it a few times, it's super fast.
And that's what I need to do, because I couldn't clean up my background noise enough when I was trying to do the voiceover. And it was surely that I didn't take the time to do the research in it. So I literally turned off everything in this room, because every time I'd record, you could hear the bubbles. And I'm like, okay, yeah, all pumps, all filters, everything off. And I need to do the research, like you said. Tom Patterson says, bleach dips, 1 cup bleach, 19 cups water. Bentley's thoughts. Took my plants a while to recoup.
I'm trying to translate cups to gallons. You still might have too heavy a concentration of bleach. You might literally have to be like 1/8 of a cup bleach to 19 cups of water. Because bleach is... I always get this in my head, because like every once in a while, whenever some random... currently we have the coronavirus, for example, but whenever some random like panic epidemic occurs somewhere, you will inevitably get internet idiots that are like, just drink bleach, you'll be fine. And then you'll get like all sorts of nurses and people on the internet who are like, please, for the love of God, don't drink bleach. What are you thinking? Just please have vaguely a small amount of intelligence. Don't drink bleach, because that stuff is so ridiculously destructive.
Yes.
And on plants, like bleach is really mean to plants. Really mean to plants because it's organic, right? It's an organic compound of some form, and bleach is designed to just decimate organic compounds.
Right.
So you might have to go like an eighth of a cup to 20 cups water if you're doing it by cups. Like I would just do something like an eighth of a cup or a quarter cup to a gallon of water or 2 gallons of water in a bucket, because you really don't need very much bleach. It's much easier to do something like potassium permanganate, just because it's a little less astringent, or even hydrogen peroxide.
And that's what I was going to ask, because I think it was Chewy that mentioned no potassium permanganate in Canada earlier when we were discussing it. So.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately aware that you guys can't use potassium permanganate. Yeah. So in that case, just use hydrogen peroxide. Like you can literally just put it in a little spray bottle like you would to mist plants or something. Quickly mist your plant with hydrogen peroxide, let it sit for like 15 seconds, and then run it through water. And that should be relatively safe.
So there is a request in the chat to see if I can get you to do your radio voice.
Oh man, I almost would like rather do one of the voices, but it's not post-processed. So, but one of the voices that we're using in the video game.
Can you?
I can. I suppose I can. Would I? That's a better question.
Well, I wanted to make sure for legal reasons that you could before I asked if you would.
I probably shouldn't, because it's supposed to be a surprise. Okay. In the sense of most people don't think my voice can do what that does.
Right.
But so I'll describe, and you guys can think this out. And eventually, once the game releases, I'll do it live, I promise. So one of the characters in the game is called Fab. And the voice notes are drag queen. And I'm the voice for that character. So, you know, most of my voice is a little more baritone, more bassy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this thing can pitch up too. And it's interesting what it does. But radio voice we might do for a sign off.
Hey, there we go. I don't know if you can see the chat in regard to the question from Mickey M. If not, I can try and pronounce it.
Is that the Chalatherina centenniensis?
Yes, that is exactly what it is.
I do not have any centennienses. I want them, but I won't be buying any new fish until I am able to responsibly expand my current tank capacity. So I've recently taken down 4 tanks. So I used to have 23 tanks running. I'm now at 19 tanks. And that's just because the power in my house is so terribly wired. Like Joel and I have talked about this because he's a contractor and knows this stuff. And I've explained some of the problems I've run into, and he's kind of just laughed at it because it's just what they do in a pinch to like speed the process up on houses when they're building a bunch. So eventually my goal is to rewire the house so it's more effective, or figure out some way where I can put tanks in another place that's not like completely intruding on my home. Right. And then at that point, I'll probably work with one of 2 sources I have for centenniensis to get myself some, because I want to have a dedicated tank for them and then later breed them.
Very nice.
But I say that about a bunch of fish, and I constantly look at myself and go, I don't have room to breed fish X, Y, and Z.
It seems to be a habit in the hobby.
Yeah, it's a terrible habit, but it happens to all of us.
Yeah, I'm trying to, and Joel touched on this a little bit. I'm trying to kind of tone down my fish room fever, if you will. I've adjusted a lot of my tanks over to where they're almost maintenance free. It's like, hey, it's entirely full of guppy grass and it just has cherry shrimp. I don't have to touch it every single week for a water change. That type of thing, because it's, like he mentioned, you get to a point where it becomes a stressor instead of a stress relief. And that's almost what I've worked myself into. Chewy says, unless you have a connection to a vet, I'm sure that Bentley knows Dr. Tim Miller Morgan at Fish Room Fever. So.
I don't know Dr. Tim Miller Morgan personally, but I know who he is, and yeah, he's one of the best options. I'm actually very fortunate in that about 20 minutes from my house, there is a vet who does fish. So if I really needed to, I could go to that vet. She keeps a phenomenally beautiful reef tank in her office. And it's a big, I think it's like 180 or 200 gallon cube, something along those lines. I mean, it's a very big tank, and it has this absolutely gorgeous reef in it. And every time I go in, I just sit and I stare at that tank while I'm waiting for whatever I have to take back, whether it's like my girlfriend's cats or pretty soon I've got to take my new puppy in because he's got to get his next round of shots.
So I have kept you for an hour. Are you good to stay for another half hour with us?
Sure.
Cool. Fantastic. I appreciate that. Let me see. There was a question up here. Oh, we had a couple people asking about this video game. If you can tell us more about it. I know you and I talked about it a little bit.
Oh, yeah. So it's called Bots and the Robo Friends. It's done by Game Grotto Softworks. I'll put a link in my community tab just further when we get a little closer to it. I'm basically waiting for them to finish the trailer, which is what the audio I was processing earlier today is for. Once the trailer's done, I'll put a link directly to the trailer. So in the trailer is one of the villain voices that I do. So I'm two villains. I'm one of the side bots, and then I'm also the trailer's narrator. So I've done a fair amount of voice work for the game. And then I'm also doing some like audio direction and process work and just generally a lot of audio related things to help them out.
Well, and that's totally awesome because that's not so, I never would have guessed, So when you mentioned it before, I was like, what?
I mean, like long ago, I worked in radio, so it's somewhere in this thing.
Right.
I'm much better at audio than I am video, where Jimmy's good at everything. So I got to try and catch up to that guy.
Yeah. I think that's like the golden standard we're all trying to hit. So again, I'm going to bounce back and forth. My apologies, but I kind of like it that way versus a scripted out set of questions. What is your your studio setup look like for your live streams? What software do you use? What's your mic setup?
So the mic, I'll actually move it. It'll probably get loud, but.
Oh, nice.
This is just a Blue Yeti. So it's one of the most generic like streamer mics out there, and that's got a cheap pop filter on it that cost me all of like $11. I
love those.
Yeah. And I specifically bought the one that's white because it was $5 cheaper than the all black one.
Nice.
And I was like, well, they're the same thing. Like I've worked in radio. These pop filters, no matter what color they are or whatever, they all do the same thing until you start getting to some really expensive stuff. There's no difference. So I'll just buy the cheapest one and save a little money.
Yeah, absolutely.
For streaming specifically, I use OBS. And then I just use, for right now, a Logitech webcam, which is the C920. Okay. The only reason that it looks better than it used to is that I've recently bought myself kind of a new light, and really good light makes a bad camera a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it looks a lot better than it probably ever has because it's the first time I've had decent lighting in my bedroom. As far as editing, I use the free version of DaVinci Resolve because that will allow you to edit all the way up to 4K without any watermarking and is a very, very powerful piece of software for something that is free.
And I have tried that. And again, I appreciate you sending me those tutorials. I think it's a computer issue at this point because it doesn't
it is really CPU and RAM intensive. So it can really be hard on a lot of computers unless you're purposely dialing your footage down. And there's ways to fix that, but which I can maybe help you later. But
gotcha. Well,
if you have a vaguely newer computer, you're probably safe. But if your computer's like mine, where it's 7 years old, you have to do some tricks and to make it be more agreeable with you.
Absolutely, yeah. It's I don't know how old the laptop is because I got it secondhand, but it's only got 10 gigs of RAM is what I had them expanded out to. That was like what it capped at. So I'm hoping once I work my way into an actual desktop that can handle things a little bit better, I'll be able to use that. But for now, I'm just editing on my phone, shoot it, edit, all that good stuff straight from the phone. But I still have those links from you that I'm looking forward to trying that, because when I pull it up and try and use it eventually, it's like as soon as I go to play the video, it just like stutters in the program.
Yeah.
And I'm
so
like, oh.
there's a setting up there. There's a playback tab. And if you look at proxy mode, it'll give you like half or quarter resolution, and that helps prevent that stuttering, because your playback will be at a lower resolution than the actual footage is, but it helps reduce the stress on your computer.
Okay, I will have to give that a go.
It's a live tip for those that want to use Resolve.
Yeah,
and see computer issues. My computer had 16 gigs of RAM, and I basically had to go upgrade it to 32 gigs for it to not like choke like crazy at what I was shooting on my camera. But thankfully, like old RAM is kind of cheap these days, so it wasn't too bad on my pocketbook.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've realized getting back into this, because this is the first computer I've had in I don't know how many years. I kind of got away from it because with smartphones I could do pretty much anything I needed to and didn't have to have one. But then with live streaming, it's like, no, you can't live stream off your mobile until you hit 1,000. So I'm like, okay, went and bought the computer, and I'm like, wait, used to be 10 gigs of RAM was awesome. Now it's like, you don't have 32 gigs of RAM? And I'm like, no.
You can usually get away with like 16. If you can do 16 nowadays, which is relatively easy now because RAM, there was a time where the industry, so sorry, this is the tech side of me.
Oh, you're good.
The industry really gouged the prices on RAM because there was a quote memory shortage, which is artificial. And so the prices on RAM were like ludicrously high. Well, that's gone away and it's all relatively cheap and competitive. Unless you're trying to do the tippy top of the highest performance stuff nowadays, and then that's typical of any computer. That's all going to be stupidly expensive.
Gotcha. So are you still doing your go ahead and cough, and yeah, I've had to do the same thing. Are you still doing your plants for profit setup?
So hurting my back like really has impeded that particular tank, but yes, there's actually the video I edited last night is a new plants for profit. So okay. That is has to get rendered tonight, and then will get uploaded on YouTube, so it'll be available Saturday. My normally ridiculous schedule has got even worse working on a video game that comes out in a month.
That makes
it's like it's basically almost all my free time that normally would have gone to YouTube has been jammed into this video game. But once that's done, I get to leverage some of those people to help me with the online Master Aquatic Horticulturist program. So that's part of why I'm like sacrificing a little time,
right? Because then
it's like 3 developers and an artist who I can all just go, okay, now you owe me. Because I did all this for free as a quote intern, unquote, because legally I have to be an intern because they're a business. So I'm technically an intern right now, as comical as that is.
Oh, I like that. Oh, goodness. Wow, I just completely lost where I was going to go with that.
That's okay. It's okay. We're getting old. It's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, look at this stuff.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, mine completely went blank there.
I would blank Chris of multi-tank addiction for the dad joke. That's
I'm going to, absolutely, and I wanted to say hi to Friday Fish Facts.
My man Ron, what's up?
Goodness, I can't believe I forgot where I was headed with that. So we'll jump into another one then. What would you if somebody wanted to get into plants for profit?
Yeah,
kind of like Corey has his old breeding for profit stuff.
Right.
What I guess would be the bare minimum, I guess, recommended like tank size that you would want to go with?
Sure.
That type.
So normally what I would say is that if you're going to do plants for profit, you want to do stem plants because they grow the fastest, and they're typically some of the easier plants to just get at a relative speed, but also have something that is easy for a person purchasing them to kind of get their feet wet, because most of the people you're going to sell to initially are like, whether it's on Craigslist or like OfferUp or even like eBay, if you're going to ship stuff, tend to be people that are a little newbies on plants, especially if you're doing local. Local, you're going to find mostly newbies who want to buy plants and not a lot of experienced people. So finding relatively simple plants to keep, but a good, like, little bit of variety. So something like you could have like a Ludwigia repens, Pogostemon octopus, or like water sprite, a simple rotala, like Rotala indica, which is really just Rotala rotundifolia, and they've named it wrong. But like simple plants are really good. And then you can have one or two harder plants. I would typically avoid things like Anubias, just because the slow growth rate can make it very hard to sell. Now, if you happen to be in an area where you have a fairly thriving club, like I'm lucky in the sense that I have a fairly big and thriving club, you can do something completely opposite. So what you can do is a 20 long and fill it with Buce.
There you go.
And just get like 6 species of Buce and let it grow out. And spoiler, the video that comes out this Saturday is Plants for Profit Buce. And if you do it right, a shallow tank you can use like little plastic shelves and stack, and you can create a ton of room in a small 20 long. You don't need a lot of light, so you can get a pretty cheap light. And the only thing you really have to like spend money on, other than your initial Buce, is get something that will give you a very small amount of CO2, because that will really accelerates the speed at which Buce grows. And because Buce is a very high demand plant, it gets a higher price. So you can get it to a point of where you're only harvesting like every month for some species or 2 months for another species. But instead of selling like 10 stems for $5, you can sell this little piece that's this big for between $5 and $10, and on the rarer species, 15 to 25.
Oh, nice.
It's all about knowing your market and knowing what people will pay for it. But if you have a thriving club, Buce is a little better, because typically everybody's got some level of basic stems or Anubias or Java fern. But getting some of like the cool Buce that we perceive as a very easy plant, but a slow grower, can get a little higher demand and can typically get you a little bit more money.
Makes perfect sense. I did remember my question. I wanted to ask you more about the online horticulturist setup. I heard you talk about that before on your streams, and
yes,
it really piqued my interest, given that we don't really have a club here, and we definitely don't have anywhere to plant nerd out at.
So the pitch is simple. For those who don't have a club anywhere in the world, my goal is to put together a online program that will put you through enough of the paces, so to speak, to where you have done easily what I have done to get to a level of aquatic mastery, to where you can get certified as a master aquatic horticulturalist. And part of that will include like educational videos that teach people some basics on how to get started.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to like handhold you through everything. You got to learn, right? But like, most of it is designed to be something to where you can very easily go on to what is most likely going to be a web app. We're still working on figuring out what we can do from a perspective of code and web hosting right now. I'm working with a couple of like super smart guys that make me feel like an idiot all the time. They're crazy smart. So we're looking at like what the design is and trying to figure out the most efficient way to make it easiest for the users. So if someone like you is to log into it, the basic goal is you would put down all the information for a plant that you're putting in one of your tanks. Okay. And then you're going to have a picture section to put the first propagation, and you'll put a picture of your first planting. Then you'll put a picture of how it looks when you first planted the plant. And then that opens up a new picture for the first time you propagate that plant.
Okay.
And then once you put that picture in there, then that basically sends a flag to me, and I go and verify it to verify that, yes, you've doubled the number of plants, right?
Right.
Or in the case of like an Anubias, you grew an Anubias to a certain size, and now you have 2 size Anubias that are 2 good size plants, right? So maybe you started with an Anubias that was about yay long. You grew it out to yay long and then cut it in half, and now you have 2 that are yay long.
Okay.
That's a propagation. Then you'll have a second propagation. And then finally, an optional, it's not required, but you can do this for extra points, is flowering that plant. Because some plants can flower, like your buces can flower underwater. Other plants, you can get them to emerge out of water and flower. That's why it's optional, but it's something that I think if you flower a few plants, you really learn a lot about not only how you can do things yourself with plants, because if you can get plants to flower, you're doing it right. That's an important thing to know. If you can get a plant to flower, that plant is extremely happy.
Good to know.
Plants that are really healthy are not going to flower. If that plant is not healthy, it's not flowering. It's not going to flower at random for you. It's only going to do it if it's really really healthy. It will flower, right?
It's almost like your fish, generally speaking. If they're breeding, something's probably going right.
If your fish are breeding, you're doing it right.
Yeah.
If your plants are flowering, you're doing it right. So once that's all done, you'll basically, that whole post will get locked. You've been awarded a certain number of points. And then you have categories, let's just put it that way, of plants. So like you have epiphyte plants, you have stem plants, you have rosette plants like swords and crypts. You'll have to do a certain number in each category.
Okay.
And then you'll have a category mastery. So like if you've mastered stem plants, whatever I determine that to be, I'm still finishing what I think is right. You'll have a mini certificate that basically says, hey, you're a stem plant master. You've completed mastery of stem plants. And then you'll have one for each. And when you've completed all of them, you will get a final certificate that says you are a master aquatic horticulturalist. And it'll just be something that is something you can print out if you want the physical copy somewhere on your wall. Because unfortunately, I can't ship worldwide. Shipping a piece of paper to Australia is surprisingly expensive from the United States, which to me, I'm sitting there thinking like, it can't be that bad, right? It weighs like nothing. That'll be $25, sir.
Yeah.
It's a piece of paper. I know. It's Australia. I'm like, all right, well, that's cool. But basically the goal is to make it so that people who don't have a local club, or maybe don't even have a local group, but happen to be really into aquatics and want to pursue plants, this will give you an opportunity to go through a program very similar to some of the best clubs in the United States. So I'm looking at like the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society. There's the club in San Francisco. There's MASI, which is the Missouri Aquarium Society. These are some of the guys that all have really, really good programs. And just learning some of the lessons from each of those programs and kind of fusing them together to make one overarching program that anyone can go through. And if you've gone through those paces, you can reliably call yourself a master aquatic horticulturalist.
Right. And like I've heard you mention before, if you cheat, you're only cheating yourself. So what is it?
Right. And if you really wanted to cheat just for a certificate, like, all right, cool on you.
Yeah.
But the goal of this is for people who really want to take the time and go through enough and realize that, like, man, I've done this much. I actually know more than I thought I knew.
Right.
And once that clicks in your head, like, you'll start going like, what else can I do? What can I do next?
Yeah.
What crazy hard plant can I figure out? And that's the point I'm at now, is it's like, all right, what plant have I never heard of? Do I want to try? Or like, what's that plant that's really hard for me to find that I want to try that I've killed 3 times already?
There you go.
Stupid Ludwigia tornado. Plant still evades me, man. I've killed it like, I think 3 times now. I've had stems of it 3 times, and every time it's like, nah, I don't want to. It's like, son of a.
So you have your Achilles heel.
Yeah, I have 2 Achilles heels. One of them right now is Rickia fluitans because I can't get rid of it like duckweed. It's in my plants for profit tank. It's been driving me crazy. So I haven't been selling plants out of that tank very much because there's so much freaking Rickia all over the place. And it takes me forever just to clean it out. And then as far as plants that don't want to grow for me, Ludwigia tornadoes just refuses, which means that if I give it to Joel, he'll probably have no problems making it be perfect. Because every time I've had a plant that doesn't want to work for me, I give some to Joel and he's just like, I don't know what your problem was, man. It's doing fine here. It's like, You
Yeah.
son of a.
Joel's that guy. I got you.
He's really good. He doesn't like toot his horn too hard, but that dude really knows his stuff. Like he legit knows a lot about plants. It's crazy. And I really wish that like my club's horticulture awards program chairperson would do interviews, but he refuses to. He's an old retired guy. But if you ever see the Seattle Aquarist on like plantedtank.net, that's our HAP chairperson, and he knows a ridiculous amount about plants, and he's like super humble about it, like, oh yeah, no, Bentley's like the best plant guy in the club. And I'm like, that's just because you don't submit anything to the program. Right. I know how this works. I know you've grown everything I've grown and more.
Well, and I want to ask you about that, but real quick, Mickey M is asking my best experience / moment with planted tanks. It would probably be, and you're going to hate me for this because I can't even tell you what the plant was, but I've had a plant that's flowered twice now, and I just thought that was awesome. So,
dude, you know what? I think that like not knowing the name of a plant is okay. It's because what happens is it drives you crazy when you get to the point of like say I launch my program and you decide to join it and you're like, man, I've had this plant flower 2 times and I just got it to flower again and I want to submit it, but I can't remember what the damn name is. You know, and I'm going to be the jerk on that side because I'm not doing the research for you. You have to know the name. You got to know the scientific name or it doesn't go in and you can't get points for it.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to help motivate me a good bit. But overall, I guess my favorite thing, I love when plants pearl. I love it when I do my water changes and everything's pearling. It's just, it's awesome. It's just one of those moments I enjoy.
You know, in like one of my favorite things to see is in my 75-gallon lawn that I have in my living room, which that's where Danger Noodle is for those that watch my channel. There is one specific Lagonandra that's in there, and that thing at the same time every day will have this continuous stream of mini bubbles. It's just pearling like crazy.
Oh, nice.
And it's just like I'll just sit and watch it as like it's starting to go in the sunset mode of my lights, and it's just like pearl, 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 pearl. And I'm like, all these other plants that grow so much faster than you aren't pearling at all. This plant that takes forever, that's on the farthest side away from the CO2 in the tank, is just like, I'm happy as can be, man. Look at all this oxygen I'm making for you.
That specifically the first time, because I didn't know plants did that. I had to look up what was going on the first time. I'm Googling bubbles coming out of my plants. I do a water change because I tried plants years ago in a previous run through the hobby, and I couldn't keep anything to save my life. And I ended up with plants this go in the hobby simply off of a lady that was getting out of the hobby for health reasons. She had a whole bunch of plants, got everything really cheap. And I'm like, I'm going to try plants. I can afford it. If I kill these, I'm not out hundreds of dollars for all these plants.
Yeah.
So the first time I do a water change, everything starts pearling. I'm like, oh my God, the plants are bubbling. Why are my plants bubbling? So that would be that I guess that one moment that will always stand out was the first time I'm like freaking out over
oh God, what have I done wrong?
That was exactly it. Sickless23 asked best boost to get from Eric Lucas.
Best boost?
Mm-hmm.
I'm really biased because there's one that I really like, but he has a ton of really awesome stuff. Like, I want to be clear. He came and commented because he had no clue that I was going to make a video about the order I did for him. So I paid for everything. It's not like I worked out some deal to advertise his business or like any sales that he's made off of it. It's not like I'm getting some cutback. I really like the guy, and he has a really phenomenal selection. I love the Pink Lady Boost. It is so beautiful. It's got these just big, lovely leaves, these bright pink stems, and the back of the leaf is pink, but the front, the like top of the leaf is this nice dark green. It's absolutely stellar. But then like the Narcissus blue, you get the light at the right angle, and it's got this beautiful blue sheen, but otherwise it looks green. And it's got that crinkly, weird looking leaf, kind of like a what's the? My brain is not working. I made this. I like when I bought the video, I was like, it looks kind of like this one, which is a really common boost, and they're all really cool. It's kind of just like look at them and look at a name and go, which one sounds neat.
Yeah.
If the picture doesn't like right away show you something amazing, which most of his pictures are really really good. I tend to prefer the bigger leafed boosts. So things like Skeleton King, the Pink Lady, any of the stuff that's going to give you like the bigger, more, I guess poppy kind of leaves, like the things that are going to just like jump out at you in a fish tank. Those are the boosts that I like the most. So if you're going to ask me what's the best boost, I'm going to say any of the ones that have big leaves on them, because that's what catches my eye. But what catches your eye might be a completely different leaf texture. You might like the tiny micro leaves because it makes it look more like a carpeting plant, or it makes it look like there's a million little plants there. Like really, all it comes down to, just like when you're picking fish, look at the stuff and go, which one do I keep going back and looking at and going like, man, that looks cool. That's the best boost. The best boost is all about which one makes you keep looking at it and go, I got to buy that thing. I don't care what it costs. You got to look at it. I got to have that. I got to see what it looks like in my tank. But if it's me, it's the Pink Lady, because that stuff is.
Yeah, those were some beautiful plants you got in that video. I was watching that going, those are nice, but I'd probably kill them.
They're all right. They're tough. You'd be surprised. Boost is tough. Boost is real tough. It deals with some really insane stuff in the wild. Just like it has a tendency to melt, but the rhizome will be perfectly fine, and the leaves grow back really fast.
Okay. The Zen Ginger says that Bentley Pascoe is 2 foot 2 deep for Scarlet Temple with Phoenix 24/7. They were in a deep bow front and never grew, and eventually started collecting algae, and the stems basically dissolved.
So if they're collecting algae, they have more than enough light. Typically, what I've found to be an issue with them is if they're in spots with not a reasonable amount of flow, they get really pissy. Like that plant likes flow, even though it's a stem, and you would think like, no, it's not going to grow properly. That it loves flow going over. It's kind of like a Nubius, where in order to keep all the gunk off of the top of it, it wants a reasonable amount of flow coming through its leaves. And then that plant as a red plant is a giant iron hound. So just make sure you're supplementing extra iron. If you use any of the liquid all-in-ones like Easy Green, or pick your poison, whichever one it is. I personally use Easy Green because the company's like right up the freeway, which takes me an hour to drive, even though it's like only really 25 minutes away. I support my local business, but there's all sorts of ones like maybe you like Nylock G, or maybe you like Dustin's Fish Tanks and he's closer to you, whatever all-in-one fertilizer you want to use. If there is an iron supplement that they also carry, use that in addition. If they don't carry that iron supplement, may I just poke and say, Easy Iron, its name is literally what it is. It's easy. But like I found my best success is a reasonable amount of light, putting it in some kind of flow so that I'm not getting any buildup on the leaves, and then extra iron supplementation because it's a pretty good iron hound.
And I'm going to try and cram in at least one more question here
Sure.
real quick. We had a question about a good CO2 regulator for somebody new to CO2.
Oh, that was from Ron. I saw that. I think the basic, so here's the thing. A lot like long-term light, where you're going to get a lot of benefit out of spending a little bit more money. You could look at like those like $40 and $50 regulators on Amazon. If you're going to do that, I would look at Milwaukee Instruments as like the best quality, cheap one. Realistically, if you go to like the basic CO2 art level regulator, so they're like $100 if I remember right. They work really well. They're pretty nice quality. I have one running. I've had it running for like a year and a half now, and it's not crazy expensive. It's not like you're talking Greenleaf Aquarium, so GLA, or anything really insane. If you really wanted to go super nice but on a budget, there is lots of tutorials on the plantedtank.net on how to build your own regulator.
Oh, wow.
And there are some people on there who will build a DIY regulator for you, who will make a regulator that's better than anything out there commercially made. just because the way to make them commercial takes away some of the more fine tuning that you can do in like your needle valve and stuff.
Gotcha.
Just because to assemble those safely and get them to ship safely is hard to do at a production scale level. But if it's like one guy in his basement who's just really good at this stuff and makes 1 or 2 a month for people, they can make that work. And
that's
there's some crazy. I've seen one of the crazy plant people I know who refuses to be interviewed, even if it's just audio, and even if I like make his voice sound all funky and weird, so it's not him. He's so super shy. He's just like, no, my best regulator is this weird one over here, and he showed it to me, and it looked like an assemblance of parts that just laid on its side, and not like how we normally look at a regulator. And I was like, what the hell is that like wonky piece of junk? He's like, oh no, this is the best CO2 regulator you're ever going to get. It's made by this one guy out in BFE.
Oh,
but he goes to like the AGA convention every time it's up, and he'll spend like $1,000 on plants because he lives out in the middle of nowhere. He can't get plants easily, but he grows all these really crazy plants, and like it just comes in, spends a ton of money at the auction, goes home, and then grows them all. And he's got all these crazy tanks with his own home built regulators, and they're like the most fine tuned, perfect regulators you can get.
See, that's awesome.
And he'll build like 1 a month that he's willing to sell, if and only if somebody's come and requested it on this one random thread somewhere. And I was just like, that's a little too crazy work for me. I'm just going to go with like a commercially made one and call it a day.
Absolutely. Well, that does put us at an hour and a half. I appreciate your time very much today. I want to thank everybody hanging out in the chat and the lurkers as well. Of course, the moderator team doing a phenomenal and fantastic job, and all these super chatters. I don't have a list. I'm going to try and remember everyone. The Zen Ginger, Mike from the Fish Tank Barn, Bob Kaler at Kaler's Aquatics, Chris from Multi-Tank Addiction, Aquarium is maintained by Andy. I believe that catches everyone, some of you multiple times. I want to thank you all very much again for that. It means the world to me. Bentley, thank you for coming on. If somehow somebody in here has not gone to Bentley's channel, please go check that out. The Zen Ginger has dropped the link in the chat below. I'm going to turn it over to you, if I may, for the outro, and hopefully we can get that lovely radio voice.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to a Fish Room Fever production with special guest, me. Have a lovely evening.
Have a great night, everybody.